everyone. Thanks for joining another episode of the PM Learning Series. My name is Shivi. I am a product manager at LinkedIn and host of today's show. Please introduce yourself, where you're joining us from, and drop in the chat. Say hi, any questions you might have for me or our guests today. So as many of you know, that the PM Learning Series is a series of live streaming events where industry thought leaders and practitioners share their best lessons learned in PM career journey to inspire aspiring and current product builders like you to build better product and level up your product career. So make sure you subscribe to the newsletter, which sends out recaps of key takeaways from today's event, as well as future event updates. You can find the link to subscribe to the newsletter from the detail tab of this event. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Pulkit, our guest today. Thank you so much, Pulkit, for joining us. It's going to be a really, really exciting session, I think, touching something pretty in-depth about, user onboarding. So I'd like to learn more from you, and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I love talking about user onboarding, user experiences, and all things product-led. So yeah, looking forward to that chat.
That's awesome. Yeah. So for those who you don't know Pulkit yet, Pulkit is the CEO and co-founder of Chameleon, the deepest product adoption platform that gives modern SaaS team the most control, configuration, and customization to win with in-product UX. So Pulkit has more than 8 years of experience in SaaS product world, featuring as a speaker for communities like ProductLed and ProductSchool. And in his spare time, he's an angel investor of ProductLed startups, which we'll talk a little bit about fundraising and your experience fundraising as well, Pulkit. So before funding Chameleon, Pulkit was the UX and user onboarding mentor at 500 startups. So you have a lot of, I think, knowledge and experience in the startup world that we're hoping to unpack today. So I'm just going to say hi. I think we have a lot of really welcoming, audience today, joining from Kenya, Nigeria, Oakland, Calgary, Canada, Miami Beach, Riverside, California, Armenia, Dallas, Indiana, Pakistan, Netherlands. Thank you very much. Think about it. It's Friday night for some part of the world. And so thanks for tuning in and learning from us. All right. Without further ado, I think, Pulkit, let's travel down the memory lane. Tell us a little bit about your career journey and what inspired you to pursue a career in product and what led you specifically to founding Chameleon.
Yeah, for sure. So in brief, I studied engineering in the UK, and I went into management consulting, which was cool back then. I don't know if it's cool now, but a lot of it was problem solving. I really resonated with problem solving, but I still thought of myself as creative. And when I was transitioning out of consulting, I was thinking about going to business school or not. I decided that actually I want to be on the front line of building business. And I knew that technology was going to be fundamental to business. And now, every company is a software company now. So I decided to try and relocate to the Bay Area so I could expose myself to technology. And there I worked with my co-founder, Brian, at another product. And the way to Chameleon was just that we wanted to work together and we wanted to solve problems together. And we looked at the problems that we had encountered. And one of those we realized was that it was, as builders of software, it was really painful for us to get people to learn how to use our software. We had all these amazing ideas of like, hey, this is so cool, but it's like people didn't see it and they bounced. And then when we spoke to other people, they kind of felt the same problem. And then we'd also experienced it from a consumer perspective. Us as software users, I remember trying to learn how to use Asana, and I had to go and have 2 screens, and I was reading a help article, and then I try and replicate what I read and follow that, then I stop, go back, and I was like, oh my God, this is like kind of annoying. Like, why I have to keep reading and watching videos. So from both the builder perspective and the consumer perspective, we saw that kind of the annoyance in learning and getting up to speed with new software, which is what got us thinking of like, hey, can we make it easier for teams to show people what to do when they're in the product? Because that's when you have the headspace where you're like, okay, I'm actively looking to learn, not after the fact when you've bounced and you're getting all these reactivation emails, but in the moment. So that's where the idea for Chameleon first came from. And I'm happy to say that it's still a problem we're excited to solve today. It's still, in our world of product-led growth, which encompasses user onboarding, but feature adoption, feature engagement, upsell, all of that is so central to business success. And so we love working on ways to help our customers improve engagement with their product, with their users, and helping users find aha moments.
I think that's awesome. There's so many nuances. I've been taking notes to like unpack to further discuss in today's talk. But first thing I want to start was similar to you. I started my career as a consulting, and it used to be so cool, right? All the cool kids would go there. Not sure about it now, but definitely resonated with that. But before we dive into sort of like, I resonated with your problem solving aspect, and so much of like, user onboarding is like going on dates, right? Like if you screw up that first impression or your first interview, right? For many folks,
that's right.
You are not going to get that second day or like a
second chance
call.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the actively like educating users in the moment as they're in the product is probably the best chance to win. And we're going to unpack so much of that. I do wanted to maybe just talk a little bit about, hey, you transitioned from management consultant to working in product to now become an entrepreneur. What would you say are some of the key lessons that you learn as you embark on this journey of self-transformation?
Yeah, I think it's in many ways it's always an ongoing process of continual learning. One of the lessons learned, I think some lessons include that in the moment, it can feel like I was impatient, where I wanted success really quickly, where it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And if I do this for this period of time, I'll get to some other point. And I think one lesson I've learned, it's a long journey. People say, look, hey, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But if it feel that way after, working on Chameleon for 7 years, it's still a process. We still feel like we're so early and there's so much to go. So the insight here is don't feel like you need to be in a rush and put in the 10,000 hours to become an expert, and get deep. Know you're in it for the long haul. So I think in this world where we're looking for shortcuts and fast-paced growth and everything fast, there is value to being steady and robust and deep.
I like that learning, long-term thinking in a short-term world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like one of the things I would say would be like, it almost feels like the days might feel like they're long. We're like, okay, working really hard, but it's the years also. I feel like they're short. Like it doesn't feel like we've been working on this for such a long time. So I think, yeah, just be patient with yourself and give yourself the grace to become an expert in what you want to do.
I love that. I also like how you stick to the bigger why, right? Like why you exist. And that's how you kind of motivate yourself over this long journey. Tell us a little bit before we transition to talk in depth about user onboarding and product-led growth, just a little bit about kind of your experience raising Series A funding, sort of what's the highs and lows. What are your advice to early stage startups that are looking for, a similar fundraising process? What would you say, like, you wish you knew, and like some tips that you wanted to pass to early stage startup founders and aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So when we raised a 13 million Series A led by Matrix Partners last year. Before that, in let's say 2021, we were unsure if we were going to be able to raise money. We'd been bootstrapping for a while, and we weren't the kind of startup that's like, okay, every 1 year you raise money. So I had some imposter syndrome. I was like, I don't know if I can raise. I haven't spoken to investors for a time. I don't know if they care about me. Am I going to get lots of no's? So we got some really good advice from one of our prior investors, Puneet from True Ventures. He's like, the only way is to go and do it. Go and try. That's the only way. Everyone can give you advice of like, oh, it's likely or it's unlikely, but you've got to try. So that's number one, is that's the true sense, if you're going to be able to raise or not. Secondly, we went into it. One of the key things that I always resonated with, and one of the reasons we bootstrapped for a period in the middle, was some advice from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, who said that don't try and convince investors. Convince yourself and then tell investors. And I think that's really important, and it's held true for myself and my co-founder Brian, is that we have only tried to raise when we feel, yes, we truly believe that this is worth it, it's working. And until we get to that point, we have to figure it out ourselves, whether that's extending our runway, whether it's like you're just focusing on product or whatever it is. So it's important to go into the fundraising process full of confidence, because not fake confidence, but true confidence, because you've convinced yourself that this is a real opportunity. And then I think thirdly, the advice is to run the process. I think many people will tell you that, but like many things, whether it's closing deals or recruiting, it's a numbers game. You start with a pipeline. If you contact 50 people in the first stage, you might get 30 meetings. Of those 30 meetings, you might get 12 second meetings. Of those meetings, you might get to 4 partner pitches. From that, you might get 1 or 2 term sheets. So it is a process. If you start with 10 first meetings, the likelihood you'll get a term sheet is just so much lower. So, and I think that one of the great resources for raising a Series A is the YC handbook on raising Series A. I would recommend folks look at that and read it. And that gave me some really good tips around metrics to look to benchmark against, this type of process. So recap those 3 tips. One, if you're looking to raise, the only way is if you're going to actually try. Don't let anyone tell you can or cannot raise. Number 2, convince yourself and then tell people, have the confidence going into it. And number 3, run it like a process, and make it like sales, use the resources you have.
Yeah, it's kind of a numbers game at the end of the day too, right? Like you said, we have a LinkedIn member, Ben, asking if they can get a recording of this webinar. Yes, replay will be available at the same link. If you just revisit afterwards, you can always rewatch. Actually, majority of our viewers actually come from rewatch. So there's that flexibility. And I think, look at what you just said, don't convince the investor, convince yourself first, really resonated with Tony as well. Don't project your sense of insecurity, right? You need to convince yourself, have that conviction. And Rahul also mentioned, hey, YC handbook is great. So thank you so much for reference that. All right, now let's get into the meat of today's talk. We talk about having a great first impression, right? The user onboarding process, because that sort of sets your product up for success, for all the retention, upsell, retouch points with the user. Let's start from the basic. Just to level set with our audience. In your opinion, what do you constitute as user onboarding? Like, where does it start? Where does it end? And why is it so important for product-led growth companies to get it right?
So I'm going to just riff with your example of dating. So let's just make it like dating. User onboarding is like getting to know someone, getting to know a product. Now, there's lots of layers to it, right? When you get to know someone, doesn't all happen on the first meeting. It can happen before. You might look them up on LinkedIn, or you might look them up, you might exchange some text. So it kind of starts when a user first starts to get impressions of your company. And so that can happen from your marketing collateral, your website, your advertising. And what you teach them in the product has to be somewhat relevant and related to what impression they have before the fact, right? If, for example, you get introduced to somebody via a friend, you might have a different conversation than if you get introduced to somebody via an online dating app. So in the same way, our user onboarding to a product should vary based on how somebody comes to the product, whether it's a specific campaign that's targeted at winning customers from a competitor versus organic content that's brought someone in. So when you then start introducing your product to your user, you're not going to be like, on day one, here's everything you need to know about me. Here's my favorite food. Here's my favorite trip. Here's what I like, my favorite brands. Here's like how I like to get feedback. Here's how I like to spend Friday nights. You don't tell the person meeting everything. And so that's one of the little tips for a user. Think about it that way. Like, what's the first thing that you want to introduce to a user that they find interesting, that they can digest and absorb before you move on to the next thing? If you start and think onboarding is, hey, I'm going to introduce someone to the whole product fully, it can be too overwhelming and too much. So anyway, I kind of went on a tangent, but user onboarding is just getting to know a product, and it could be a new feature, or it could be a user coming back after a long time. Those are still examples of someone needing to be introduced or reintroduced to a part of a product or the new form of the product today.
Yeah, I love that, because I think usually we think about onboarding, we think about, the first time users sign up for your product, right? But what you just said unpacks so many little nuances in that. First, where do they come from? That could influence their awareness, of your product, and you can personalize sort of contextually that experience depending on they coming from a campaign or coming from your content, right? And then what you also said is like, hey, don't show them the entire thing and overwhelm them. So there's a sense of elements of sequencing of like, what is the right first thing to show versus the next thing. And then the last thing you said also was really interesting, is like, onboarding doesn't end the first time they sign up, they register, give you that email, right? Like, it's like, if they ever come back, if you loop them back, there's an element of reintroducing or continuously onboarding, the user. So I really like that. I wanted to go into some of that, if you can just like tease that apart and maybe share some best examples or common pitfalls that you think people should be looking out. So I guess the first thing is, you mentioned about, hey, don't show people everything, show them part of the product. Do you have any like example or good like sort of best practice or framework to think about what part of the product you should be showing people, and like how do you judge?
Yeah, for sure. So if you want to drive value to a user coming into your product, what you should think about is, what are their aha moments in the journey, in the new user journey. So aha moments are moments where someone's eyes light up. They're like, this is delightful, or like, I really get it. Like, this is so cool. And you can figure that out from user research, from interviews, or looking at what you promote on your website as best features, or what your customers' success teams know that they use and stuff. So find the key things that are delightful to a user, then figure out what is all of the small things a user has to do to get to that aha moment. So okay, I have to sign up, I have to click a confirmation link in my email, I have to read this paragraph, I have to click this button, I have to input this text, I have to make this decision. And you'll realize there's many small things that a user has to do before they get to that aha moment. And what that means is, every time they're doing those things, they're exerting work. They're basically using their cognitive load, they're spending energy, and what's happening is their well of excitement is kind of depleting over time. So they're like, okay, I'm excited, I came in with all this motivation. That's depleting. When they get to the aha moment, it's a refill. Okay, my well of motivation and enthusiasm and energy is refilled. So what we have to do is, before their well is depleted, which is at the point they bounce, we need to give them an aha moment. And so what we want to avoid is depleting that well unnecessarily. So don't have them make decisions or read stuff that they don't have to use right now. So if you're showing them everything in your product, they're reading all this stuff, it's not relevant right now. So focus on the minimal things they need to understand, and the easiest way for them to get to the aha moment. Now, if that means they need to take 3 key actions, so you have like a navigation menu, there's 8 items in your navigation menu, but you know that most people, or we'll talk maybe more about this, but this group of people go into navigation item 1 because that's where they find value. Only show them, or only point them to navigational item 1. Don't go through every single thing of like, hey, this is what number 1 does, this is what number 2 does. That's not relevant. Just take them to 1 and get them to the aha moment, so that they have the well to keep exploring and learning about your product.
I love that. I think it also really resonated with the LinkedIn community as well, right? Abhishek said like how soon a user can benefit and experience success. So the aha moment, they would actually be more willing to come back. And I like Tony's analogy of like finding the cheese in the maze and what is the shortest possible path to get there. So that's a really lovely analogy. Now, talk us a little more about, besides, removing all the friction to get to that first moment of delight. I like how you mentioned about mapping out all the steps, right? So that you can really streamline and remove them. What else do you think tend to get wrong? And like when founders go about thinking about, I have this onboarding journey and I want to hope, your user, you want them to stay. What tend to get wrong in this process?
Yeah, so one thing that's very common, especially for product people, unfortunately, to get wrong is the focus on how. How should we do this? Like, how should you do X in the product? And actually, in many cases, users are searching for why. Why should they care? Why is this relevant? Why is this beneficial? So in our onboarding, if we can orient a little bit away from teaching people how to do something to motivating people to do that thing with the why. So I'll give you an example. Often we'll see in the product, there's a very obvious empty state and there's a big CTA, like, start here, whatever the product is. And sometimes people put a tooltip and they say like, hey, click this button, start here. But so what they're trying to do is they're trying to teach people how to get started. They're like, okay, click this button to get started. But actually, that's not the problem. The problem isn't that user can't see the button. The problem is they don't care to click the button. And why do they not care? Is because they think the ROI isn't there. Like, oh my God, I don't know how long this thing's going to take, or I'm not quite ready to get into it right now, or like, I'm not quite sure what this product even does. I don't know if I'm going to find value in this product. So they have questions of why. So instead of pointing a user to where they should get started, if you, for example, said, hey, folks that do X find value within 30 minutes, here's a case study or here's an example of why, suddenly you're like connecting the dots to benefits to a user. And then that's much more likely that they will be motivated to figure out how themselves. So you don't need to teach them how always. If you can motivate them around the why, they will figure out a lot of the how. So I think that's one simple mistake that teams make, is they're always oriented or too oriented around the how. And I'd like them to orient a little bit more around the why.
I definitely resonated with that. And the tooltips too. I think it's just even a mental checklist of like, if people need to hover over or learn a tooltip to learn how to get started, that's failed already, the onboarding process to some extent, right? I wanted to also talk about, we have one question from Eileen. I think you mentioned like user research, figure out the delight moment, but if you have any other tips around how to figure out what is the right aha moment to get the user to?
Yeah, so the aha moment it's an emotional moment. It's not a magic number. Magic number was like Facebook's 5 friends in 7 days or something, which is a metric correlated to retention or success. But the user, when they've got their 5 friends, that's not lighting a spark for them. What's lighting a spark for them is seeing a photo or a picture or something. So I think we have to remember aha moment is different to the magic number. And so for aha moment, and it's emotional, you have to really get into the shoes of the user. So you should either speak to people, like what was the most exciting thing about the product? What do you love about the product? Or you can see if you're watching session replays, like stuff that gets people excited. When they click on that, they keep going and they keep staying. Or you can, if you don't have any hypothesis and you can't speak to your users, look at what your marketing team or you as a kind of marketer are promoting about the product. What do you tell people? It's like, hey, this is the cool thing about my product. Oh, this is the thing that you can do. So when the cool thing that you're referencing when you're talking about your product to other people is likely where your aha moment is within. So that can give you some direction on that.
Yeah, I do like the both taking a qualitative and quantitative approach, right? The qualitative one, like you said, user research, looking at heat maps, looking at session replay, see where people clicks, talking to them. I do like occasionally, depending on the platform, like a platform like a transactional one, like a marketplace, like Uber or Amazon or some sort of e-commerce site. I do think it's helpful to like measure, like are people buying your first product? Are people signing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. The magic number has its place, and it's very important to know key metrics that are leading indicators of success, of retention, of engagement. And what you want to do is drive those metrics. But what you want to do is drive them by understanding aha moments. If you get people to the aha moment, it's likely that those metrics will go up. So it's just how do you get to make an effect on those metrics? It's like with Facebook's example, how do you get people to add friends? It's by showing them the benefit of seeing a photo from a friend. That's the thing that, from an aha moment and the UX perspective, and then the benefit of it is that you'll get to this metric.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a little bit about, so let's say the first part of onboarding is showing us minimum list, the path to getting the cheese in the maze, right? At least possible resistance. And then you also mentioned about, motivating user on the why, not so much the how. So I like that. But let's talk about, let's say you experience the aha. Now, how do you continue to onboard them or motivate them such that they figure out more part of your product and the benefits? Is there a framework or tip that you or your product is trying to continue to educate them and onboard them to do bigger and more things with your product?
Yeah, so it's not that there's only one aha moment. There'll be many aha moments through the user lifecycle, and some of them will be small aha moments, like, oh, I was able to create something. Like, let's look at Notion, maybe an example. Like, okay, cool, I can create a page, I can add a little icon. That's kind of cool. I like that as an aha moment. Later on, I've explored there's an integration with Figma. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's embedded. I can resize it. And then now recently they released AI. There's a new aha moment there. It's for me to go try it out. And so you'll notice that there's lots of aha moments, both in the product's evolution as also the customer's life cycle within the product. So whenever you're trying to drive adoption of functionality, you're trying to deepen engagement, improve retention, reduce churn, you should be looking at the stages of a customer. And so what I would recommend is you try to map out a journey by feature adoption. Okay, the earliest customers will likely adopt this feature, this group of features. Later on, they might adopt this other group of features. Later on, this is a more sophisticated usage. And within that, what is the aha moment? And do little onboardings. And it's just like little product funnels or product loops that you're looking at aha moment. What's the journey and all the steps of things they have to do to get to that aha moment? How do we remove friction? And then potentially, what can we show in the product to help them get over the gaps or get over the jump? So let's say they're not feeling motivated about doing something. You can showcase, like I said, the benefits, the case study, or maybe they're struggling with a decision. Like, I don't know if I should choose X or Y, and that's a hard decision. You have to go read about it. You have to go ask somebody. Then you could put an in-product prompt that says, most people choose X, or don't worry about choosing now. You can change it later. So that's where the in-product communication, in-product messaging can come in to help people get to aha moments.
Yeah, I think there's so many decision choice hierarchy, architecture and play, right? To figure out how can you simplify that decision making or those choices and continue to create that aha moment for users. I wanted to ask you that as you are working on this domain for a couple of years now, and there's constantly emerging trends in the product-led growth space and all the different various tactics, from the early days of Dropbox, right? Sending referral emails, get 5, gigabytes of space to right now, there's a lot more stuff. What would you say are some of the trends that you're seeing in this space that's like gets you really excited or nervous that you like to share with our audience?
Yeah. So I can share maybe 2 trends. One is that the change in how we make products and value accessible. So we're seeing more and more value up front before you have to commit, a user has to commit to anything. So whether that's being able to sign up for the product without talking to sales, whether it's being able to try a product in a sandbox without installing, whether it's being able to go live with a product without putting a credit card in. So we're seeing the value being pulled more and more further forward. And I would recommend all of the teams to think about where can they be delivering value before they ask for work. One example that we're trying to do is we're trying to ungate our content. We're not trying to say, hey, you have to put in the form details to get our report or get our amazing content that we're investing so much time and energy in. It's like, no, just have it. We want to educate. We want to learn. We want to give you value. And maybe if you get value from it, maybe you will come back and share or think of Chameleon when you're next time you're thinking about buying a product adoption platform. So I think that the one trend is that value moving forward or higher up the chain. higher up the funnel. And I think the related to that is this whole kind of movement of product-led everything. So even, for example, with sales, getting people to evaluate the product first before engaging them, or like for support, getting people to learn from within the product. So there's a lot of like product, everything's kind of centering around product. Great for our community of product managers. And then I think there's other kind of little like patterns that are changing, which is always something that we're interested in. For example, we're noticing a search pattern in the product where people, with the likes of Slack or the likes of Notion, you can hit Command K to be able to do a search or do actions. And so we've built a product for that now, where companies can implement Chameleon, and then you can have a search inside your application that searches all of your content, whether it's your help articles, your developer documentation, your blog, because we're seeing people get familiar with that pattern of Command K to find something. And again, they're in the product. That's where they want to learn. They don't have to go out to a different site. So that's just an example of a pattern that we think is evolving and that we're trying to support. So, and it's always fun because there's so many different patterns that we get to see that people are doing, and our goal is to try and make that accessible to all the companies.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like the product-led everything. It's basically making it more and more self-serve, making it more and more intuitive, easy to access. Search is one thing. I think probably very soon, ChatGPT, the chatbot, will be understanding all the help center articles, all the content you ever created, right? And then be able to support that experience as well.
Can I tell you a cool little thing that we're building that's like under wraps, but we'll share it with this very private community right now. But we're building this ability to plug in a help article and spit out a tooltip. So it's like, okay, you already want what you have this detailed help article and we can use ChatGPT to summarize it and give you a little snippet to put in the product right where it's necessary, so that you can kind of bring a lot of that amazing knowledge that you have in your help articles into the product, again, making it accessible to people in the moment, meeting them where they are.
That's awesome. I love that. Can't wait to try some of
Yeah.
this. Okay, so we're coming up at time and 9:30 Pacific time here. So I would ask you maybe one final question, and then we can transition to lightning round. So let's say there are PMs in this community, listening and wanted to improve their product user onboarding, right? What would you say? You offer a lot of tips already, but let's just say if I'm a PM working on a product market fit, startup company versus a very mature product, and you're still working on onboarding and trying to always optimize it. What are some sort of tactical steps or tips or advice you will give to these two groups of PMs working on new emerging product, trying to figure out product market fit, and then the other side is like, it's pretty mature, but you're still trying to optimize. What's your advice?
Yeah, good question. So for the pre-PM fit person, I would say try doing a friction log of your onboarding or any key flow in your product. Friction log is you can search it. There's it's a method to really connect with the emotion the user is feeling through the journey of the product. And it will hopefully bring some insight to you about where there's real frustration and where a user might about turn and go backwards. So a friction log is a really good way. Sometimes, as builders, we disconnect from like what the emotional state is. For somebody that's very, mature, I would recommend going hard at segmenting your user base and figuring out what are the different traits and qualities and personas of user, and what are their different goals and different aha moments. And I will guarantee they will have different aha moments because they'll have different jobs to be done. And that's the biggest low-hanging fruit for us, is to personalize. Like going back to the dating experience, right? We don't want, when you meet somebody, you don't want them having the same spiel regardless of who they're meeting, right? You want them to cater the spiel to things that you care about and what you're interested in. And so for a mature product, the onboarding should be personalized. It should be multiple flavors of it based on the type of user you have.
Yeah, I love that, because just case in point, like LinkedIn, for example, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of LinkedIn, but I can offer it as an example. Like it's getting more and more mature now as a platform, right? So when people on boards, actually, we add in questions around job seeking intent, like are they an active job seeker? Then you can tailor the flow a little bit more oriented around, if you're active, you may be more wanted to use our jobs product a little more, versus if you're like passive seekers or you're not really looking for a job, then the experience should be more exposing feed, like the benefits of, seeing other knowledge content on your feed. And like, so the I guess the path to get into aha and the different type of aha, like you said, could be different. So I like that advice of being more sort of understanding of different jobs to be done and customize it that way. All right, we're coming up at time. Thank you so much, Pulkit, for sharing your wealth of knowledge about product-led growth, user onboarding with us. I'm sure the LinkedIn community will benefit a lot from it. We have a little bit of a quiet crew, even though there are a couple hundred people on the show, but hopefully, a lot more people will listen to our replay and come back. And again, we'll send our recap of all the key knowledge points that you talk about and share with the community. Now, as we end our show, we ask a round of lightning question to all of our guests. You should answer it in 60 seconds or less. Pulkit, are you up for the challenge?
I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Awesome. So what is your favorite product currently? Please don't say it's Chameleon. It has to be something else.
No. My favorite product right now is a tool called Fathom.video. It's a call recording software, which because I'm on so many Zoom meetings, I use it all the time. I love the fact that it uses AI to give me summaries of highlights in my calls. So it will automatically tell me what happened. It's a great way for somebody to kind of pass my calls. That's
awesome. Wow. Who would you say is your product role model that's been like most influential in your startup / product career?
Yeah, I think one of them would be Sean Flowers. He was ex-head of product growth at Atlassian when Atlassian built a bunch of great product-led growth stuff. He's been CPO at a bunch of other companies, including MuleSoft. And I think one of the reasons I like him is he gives really no bullshit advice. It's very, very calm, like understand the numbers, understand the data, and it's real core, like, remembering that product is a science rather than a lot of like hype and hand waviness. So he's awesome. He does a course on Reforge, and yeah, go follow him if you can.
That's awesome. The growth hacker, and that known to be, right? Okay. Last but not least, what is one final piece of advice or resource you like to share with folks who are building?
Okay, this is gonna be controversial, but LinkedIn. Can you believe that? This is not a plant. It was not paid for this product placement. But I'm finding more and more so LinkedIn has really digestible, valuable content from key folks. Now, it's important to follow the right people and follow them, but it's just a really consumable way to get really insights, and I love it. So I think there's amazing Substacks I can tell you about. Kyle Poya's and Ibrahim Bashir's Substacks are great, but I think LinkedIn's a great place where you get a lot of those summaries.
Thank you. That's what we try to make our feed to be more knowledgeable. But you have some fans in the audience to check out your blog as well. That has a lot of great articles. And then I think the notion of a friction log, to like map out all the little nuances so that you can figure out your least resistant path to get to the cheese in the maze. I think it's a really good advice. And so thank you so much, Pulkit, for being here. I think the LinkedIn community have find it really, really informative and valuable. So really, really appreciate your time with us and sharing your knowledge. So yeah, amazing session from Riley. So thank you so much again. And so
Pleasure.
Folks, please subscribe to our newsletter so that you can hear recap from this event. And Pulkit will also share some relevant articles and resources that we will continue to build up the knowledge for how to ace the user onboarding process, right? So thank you so much for Pulkit.
And I think we'll have to do another one because there's somebody hoping to learn about failed PM hires, running sprints, and using data. That's a whole other session. We can happy to talk about it. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm going to try and post about many of these topics on my LinkedIn feed. So hopefully there's a way to find me and follow me, and I'll try and offer more experience if I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. People should search for your name. And then there's a little bell, on your profile. Pro tip is like if they bell you, or that means they subscribe to all of your updates. Probably need to improve how to get to that moment so that people get more aha and learn how to do that. All right. Thank you so much, Pulkit, for spending time with us. And thank you, all of you, LinkedIn community, for joining us for another very informative session. So, Have a great weekend and see you next Friday. All right. Bye.